on fossil fuels on that sort of shaky foundation is actually, ironically, not giving us that much more pleasure.
Well, that's both the good news and the bad news. I mean,
Right.
it's sad that Americans were more satisfied with their lives. A higher percentage of them said they were very happy 50 years ago. Okay, a much higher percentage, which is pretty sad because we've spent 50 years mining the world and changing the atmosphere and everything, and it really hasn't brought us much. But the good news is that means, you know, we may be in a place finally where we could, if we really got that message through our heads, begin to think about changing. I mean, the reason that we've grown steadily less satisfied, or so most of the data suggests, is precisely this lack of community that's an inevitable byproduct of our affluence.
Right, living in the suburbs.
Well, what did we do when we started getting money? We built bigger houses farther out in the suburbs. So, I mean, just physically, the mathematical odds of running into someone in the course of the day were dramatically reduced. Americans have something like half as many close friends on average as they did 50 years ago. Turns out that matters. Turns out it matters more than the fact that you now have a 86-inch flat screen television on the wall.
Right.
You know, it just turns out that the mathematics of this is that you'd be happier with a new friend than with a new television screen, and you really don't get to choose both. You know, that's not the sort of standard American answer, I'll have some more of everything, just doesn't seem to work in this case. The amount of time that it takes to, you know, acquire the things that we have and the kind of single-minded focus on ourselves that it takes means that our social connections have worn away. We eat meals with family, friends, neighbors, you know, like half as much as we used to 50 years ago. Now, you know, one of the things to note about local economies and all the sort of things I'm talking about is that they are at least as much conservative ideas as they are liberal ones. They're really sort of not either in a sense, I think. But it's not at all clear that it's a sort of liberal notion to, you know, worry about supporting your neighbors and whatever.
Or the small farmer versus this big corporation.
It's just, I have a neighbor in Vermont who runs a great institution called the Farmer's Diner that just serves local food. And Todd printed up a bunch of bumper stickers that said, "Think globally, act neighborly," which seems to me like reasonable advice for the time we're in. Especially because, you know, even if we do everything we can now to slow down global warming, we're in for one hell of a century. You know, we've undone the balance of the climate. There's going to be bad effects. Whether we can avert real catastrophe, we don't know. But at the very least, we're going to want to have communities that are resilient and durable and tightly connected, and those are going to be more valuable to us than ones whose only feature is that they produce a great surplus of stuff.
Right. So I keep thinking, like, if you were president, you know, I mean, it seems like a time
Please.
when urgent action is needed, and a lot of good people like Al Gore, of course, are saying this, but without that kind of leadership.
The leadership's not going to.
Right.
You don't sit around waiting for the president.
Well, I know you don't.
You do.
Yeah.
You do what you need to do to make sure that whatever president it is feels some pressure to act.
Well,
you
so
know?
tell me, like, what would step it up? What are you trying to do, and what is sort of the game plan?
We're trying to have, and we are going to have, the first real nationwide protest about climate change. I organized with some friends a march across Vermont last Labor Day. By the time we got to Burlington, 50 miles, 5 days later, we had 1,000 people marching, which is actually pretty good for Vermont. That's a lot of people in Vermont.
Right.
But the newspapers the next day said, this is the biggest demonstration that there's yet been in the U.S. about global warming. And that just struck us as pathetic. It's sad, and it's no wonder we're not making any progress. You know, nobody feels any pressure. So we set up this website, stepitup07.org. Said, please, organize in your, we're not going to do a march on Washington, organize in your community an event for April the 14th, and then we're going to photograph them all and link them all together and make it a kind of national thing. We thought if we worked real hard, we might somehow be able to get 100 of these rallies by April 14th.
Which would be like 2 per state. That'd be pretty
Which
good.
would have been way more people than had ever participated in anything like this ever on climate change. Well, not because we're good organizers, just because the timing was right and people were eager to do something. We're now over 1,000 of these rallies in all 50 states, in most congressional districts. It's going to be really exciting when it happens, and it's putting just the kind of pressure we need to put on people. I mean, it's already working. Our goal all along has been we need Congress to enact 80% cuts in carbon emissions by 2050. A real wholesale change in our economic life. Last week, John Edwards, one of the 3 leading Democratic presidential candidates, released his energy plan, sent it over to us before, as he was releasing it, and that was the #1 item on his checklist, 80% cuts by 2050. An idea that was radical 3 months ago is now deep into the mainstream, and it just shows what happens when people begin to organize.
And obviously Al Gore was on Capitol Hill for one of the first times
Absolutely.
in official capacity, and he called for 90%.
Al Gore is our great, he's been the great educator on this. Hurricane Katrina blew open the door. Al Gore walked through. It's been terrific. We've got to get his back now. He's done the educating, and we've got to do the political organizing that makes it real, so that it's not just about Al Gore. That Congress understands that there are an awful lot of people following him.
Well, and one of the things I found inspiring was that the 20 or so people who helped you sort of create Step It Up are all college graduates or...
6 of them, and they're all graduated from college in the last 6 months.
So young people kind of being involved. A lot of times, at least in Boulder, I feel like, strangely, there's a lot of great... obviously there's a lot of great young people, but they aren't that concerned with the environment, with many of the issues that we try and kind of cover in a hip, young way.
Well, at the moment, at least in where I am, young people are coming alive. The campus movement around climate change is going to be the most important campus movement since the, anti-war and civil rights movements of the 1960s. These kids are terrific. They're incredibly well organized and hardworking, and passionate and serious and fun at the same time about all this. And it's reflected around the country in the kind of actions that people are organizing. Each one's more creative than the one before. We're going to have teams of scuba divers demonstrating underwater off the coral reefs in the Florida Keys, which will be gone.
I want to join that one.
We're going to have people skiing in formation down the dwindling glaciers in the Rockies and the Sierras. We're going to have thousands of people in blue T-shirts like yours crowding into lower Manhattan and kind of sea of people to show where the water's going to come.
They're going to join hands and actually show where the water will go.
That's it.
If it rises.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Finally time to do something.
Yeah.
And people are just responding in the most amazing ways. And across the political spectrum, evangelical churches, college campuses, senior citizens' homes, everybody's organizing things.